Well, hey everyone, this is Steve Kozak, Director of Awana Youth Ministries, coming at you with your answers to, I'm sure, a whole lot of questions that you guys have about our new Advocates curriculum. I tell you what, it's a really quiet day here at the home office. I'm coming to you from Streamwood, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, and it's super quiet. Why is it super quiet? Because we're done. We're doing the little last filming in California right now. My team is finishing up, but all the writing, all the production, all the stuff on our end is done. We are ready. It is almost to the publishers, and it is ready, almost ready to come to you. We are super excited. This is, I don't know, guys, I'm calling this some groundbreaking stuff in the world of youth apologetics, some stuff that you and your youth ministry will absolutely benefit from. We have been so fortunate to partner with Sean McDowell and use his expertise and his experience at just capturing some of the big issues that your students are wrestling with. So let me just get right into it, and let's get right to your questions, the things that you guys are concerned with, so that we can best serve you.
All right. We received many questions online and via email, and so kind of jumping into it. So you talked about how this is kind of some groundbreaking stuff. Outside of the topic, what can you tell us that's maybe different about the way Advocates is presented as far as the book form and any updates to that as opposed to Disciples?
We had such good response from our Disciples curriculum that we really didn't see a huge need to change anything major within Advocates. We did add a couple of fun things. It seemed weird. We didn't have a table of contents in Disciples, so we added a table of contents. We wanted to make sure that everyone was really clear on what it took to get an award. So we added a page at the back that lists all the necessary awards and what's required to get those things and sign off and all that kind of stuff. So that's there for you. We've just messed a little bit with how we looked at the days and some of the spacing and the look of the book. It's actually a little bit easier to read, and I think it's very, very clean and very nice. But other than that, it's really the same thing. We give students the opportunity to work through every single day of the week something. It's small. They're bite-sized amounts. There's something that the student can do in just a couple of minutes. But that gets them fully engaged in Scripture throughout the week. And then the leader guide, again, walking you as a leader through step by step what you need to do if that's what you need. But again, just like we did with Disciples, fully customizable discussion guide, leader guide, student Bible study, as well as the essentials.
Great. You mentioned some of the cleaning things up. We had some people talk about wanting more writing space or making things easier to read in the book. Can you talk about some of the design changes related to that?
Yeah, like I said, mostly it's just really, really clean. If you've had a chance, you should download the sample. It gives you a really good perspective of what that looks like, and you can get that at getjourney.org. And it's black text mostly on a white background. So we had some talk about what that looked like and how that felt. So it just feels very, very clean. And we gave the students a little bit of extra space so that they can make the necessary notes.
Right. We've had some people talk about just the complexity of how much work there is involved during a week throughout the study. And some students asking about and feeling like they're having a hard time keeping up or feeling discouraged that they can't complete every task in the book. What would you say about that and as it relates to Advocates?
Yeah, I think, it's difficult because on one end, we want to make sure that we respect the fact that we are talking about Bible study. We are talking about something that is, in many ways, academically challenging and should challenge their faith in terms of thinking. We want them to use their mind. As disciples of Jesus, they're called to engage their mind. So we want them to do that. But we also know that one of the greatest challenges in youth ministry, in fact, I think some pastors would argue the greatest challenge, is time. That we are competing in a world where students are busier than ever. So we also understand that, hey, students sometimes are just not going to get to it all. So for the student that's like super diligent and on top of it, I don't think it takes a student any more than maybe 20 minutes to half an hour, maybe a little bit longer, to work through the daily work. But I just talked to a church a couple weeks ago, and their biggest issue is that students are cramming the night before or the night of and trying to get all their work done in a few hours the night of or whatever on their way to club or those kinds of things. The reality is these are students, and that's just what they're going to do. So you can't really stop that. But hey, at the end of the day, as long as they're getting the work done, as long as they're getting engaged with what we have in the student Bible study, I think that's awesome. We have the ideal we think really works, but we'll take what we can get.
Yeah. So the next series of questions really have to do with the content. Advocates, we've heard the term apologetics thrown around. So really, I'll let you kind of take it from here and tell us a little bit about the content of advocates and really how somebody as a volunteer youth worker who may not have a ton of apologetics training might be able to be helped out with this book. And, what do I, as a volunteer youth worker or, anybody, tell me why I should feel okay about journeying into this subject.
Yeah, it's sort of a common misconception that the world of apologetics is reserved for, for seminary or for college courses, for people who have, degrees, graduate degrees or whatever the case is. And it is the case to some degree, but really at a popular level, on an everyday level, it's just not the case. In fact, if we actually looked at it, we'd be doing apologetics probably more often than we even realized. The things that we're discussing with our students and what we're talking about through this entire book are things that our students are asking. So they're questions that students are presenting to their youth leaders in every way, shape, and form. So these are just things that we're just saying, hey, you should probably be prepared to answer these things. Even the word apologetics is a little bit scary, and really all we're talking about is the means to be prepared to give a defense or give a reason for what we believe and why we believe it. Every Christian is called to do that. So we're just encouraging our students, largely because when they move on to the next level and they move on to college, they have to be prepared. They've got to be ready for that professor that tells them that Christianity is for fools. They've got to be prepared for that 3 a.m. dorm room conversation with their friend that's an atheist. They've got to be ready for the conversations that are coming in a world that largely is rejecting Christianity. And that's what this is going to do. So from the very beginning, we just introduced the concept of apologetics. What is it? Why is it necessary? And what's the kind of the point of it? And then we start to slowly build a case for the Christian faith. We sort of take the approach that we don't assume that every student is a believer. We don't assume that every student even knows why they believe it. Maybe they're just still on their parents' faith. They're just kind of assuming these things are true. Well, how do we know what faith is? How do we know what truth is? How do we know how science and faith go together? Do they even go together at all? What about the Bible? Is the Bible a reliable source for truth? How do we know the words that we have that are thousands of years old are actually the words of Jesus or the actual events of the nation of Israel and those types of things? Do we know that the prophecy written down is actually prophetic? So how can we be sure those things are actually the case? What about archaeology? The resurrection of Jesus. If you've been paying attention at all to the blogs we've been putting out, we're talking a lot about, especially around this time of Easter, with the resurrection. Can we actually know if the resurrection is true? What about the early disciples? So many of them died for their faith. Does that have any credibility when we're talking about the nature of truth in the Christian faith? We take that all the way through, even into probably the most significant question that students have is, why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? It's the question of evil. It's the question of suffering. We tackle that head on. And each one, again, just like we did with Josh and Disciples, what we're doing with Sean and Advocates is we're 32 videos, 32 lessons of Sean walking us through each of these arguments, building to a point where the logical conclusion is that objective truth exists, that Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody gets to the Father but by me. And at the end of the day, these things are true, and Christianity has the best possible answers to life's greatest questions. But we don't stop there, which is awesome, because these are all great things in concept. But if our students don't know how to use them, what good are they? So we encourage our students to actually branch out and launch into understand how to have a conversation that has spiritual implications, how to engage in conversation that's loving, that's full of grace, that's seasoned with salt, that's talking about truth, but doing so in humility. What does that actually look like, and how do students actually engage in that conversation? So we start with the most simplistic thing about what is this thing we call apologetics, but then we move it into how do we actually do this thing we call apologetics?
What kind of helps will be provided for the leaders to kind of lead the discussions that will probably come out of the subject?
Well, again, we have the leader guide that's going to walk them through that. We have the discussion guide that's going to help our small group leaders do that. But what we've also done is we've crafted our leader videos that last year were more directed at how to actually use the curriculum specifically, and gave some great tips and advice, new curriculum, new way of doing things, and a great tool. Well, now that most of our users are sort of used to the rhythm of things, we felt we needed to dive into more of the nitty-gritty of, well, what are some of these concepts? Some of these things that we're dealing with, like logic and truth and science and monotheism and pantheism, and naturalism, these things are difficult concepts. Some of them have some nuances and some things that, maybe we're not all that well versed on. So what I do is each leader video, I take the leaders through just some deeper concepts and deeper ideas so they understand a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes, so they feel a little bit more comfortable about talking through the material so that they can lead effective discussions.
Can you describe the differences on the Essentials book versus the study book, particularly how it relates to advocates, or for those who didn't use Journey Disciples last year?
Yeah. Especially with advocates, I think it's really important to recognize that we can never assume, and I hope this is the case in your youth group, that not everybody is full-fledged, Bible-thumping Christian. That would be awesome, but I actually hope that you got some people seeking Jesus, some people asking questions. The one thing about advocates that I think we need to consistently stress is we want you to create an environment where questions are normal and natural and welcomed. And the tough questions, students need to feel like they can ask the tough question. And if you do that, that's going to invite sort of the skeptic, invite the seeker, invite the person that's sort of curious about what you guys are doing. So if that's the case, then you're going to have some people that maybe aren't ready for this big whopper of a book to go through every little piece. Well, and that's what Essentials is for. Essentials is for that student who's new, who's young in the faith, who's not sure, but needs to have something in their hand to guide them through, specifically the Bible study. So what we do in Essentials is we take the Bible study portion and one really good question to ask them. We kind of trim the Bible study portion down. We include the verse, the core concept, and all those pieces. But literally, if you open it up, the entire week's worth of stuff is on 2 facing pages, and that's it. So it's very non-confrontational. It doesn't look as daunting. It's not as intimidating as maybe the Bible study is for someone that's really new. We want to encourage kids to come and encourage them to engage in discussion rather than hinder them by all this work that maybe they're not even sure they want to do yet.
Yeah. For those who maybe did not do Journey Disciples last year, is there a particular sequence in which we should be doing the books? Should we start with Journey Disciples and then do Advocates? Does a student need to do Disciples before they do Advocates, or does everybody just jump into Advocates?
Well, that really is I think, a question you have to ask yourself in terms of your needs as a youth group. We don't structure it that way where you have to do one before the other. You can dive into any one you want. Ones we got coming up in the next couple of years, you can dive into those first when those come up if that's what you were doing. All of our books are about what it means to be a disciple. So Disciples proper is just about what a disciple of Jesus looks like and how does the disciple of Jesus behave. But then Advocates takes that a step further and says, okay, what are some other things that a disciple does? So a disciple not only knows what it means to follow Jesus, but a disciple actually engages in spiritual conversation and builds relationships and can defend their faith and understands the deeper things of their faith and knows why they believe those things. And then as we move on to things like witnesses, they know how to share their faith and how to use the gifts that God has given them. And then moving on to leaders, they know how to be a leader that others can follow as they follow Christ. So all of it is about discipleship. All of it is really encompassing what it means to follow Jesus. So it really doesn't matter where you start. My goal as a youth leader would be to make sure that I have hit all 4 books for 4 years worth of the journey of a student from 9th grade to 12th grade.
You mentioned the videos that are for students, they're created for students. How are the students supposed to access those, and how do I, as a youth leader, encourage students to use those videos?
Yeah, so we've designed those. There's a link in each of the student Bible study, a direct link. We don't put it out there publicly so anybody can just grab it. So, but the student has a specific way of getting to it, and they can view those videos as many times as they want, see them and replay them, or whatever they want to do with them. It is our suggestion that they use it within, on their own, something they can watch throughout the course of their week. However, that's not like something that's engraved in stone. They have to do it that way. It's awesome that they've got some context going into group and they understand some things. That's great. But I've also talked to some youth leaders that they love to use the videos as a bumper video leading into large group or a sermon or those kind of things. So it really is up to you how you want to use the video. But with Sean's expertise and the content of the videos and the quality of these videos, I would in some way, shape, or form make watching these videos an absolute priority.
Cool. And those videos, the youth leader can watch those online and also download those to be played during youth group as well.
Correct. Yeah.
What else can you tell us about kind of the overall scope and sequence of advocates?
Well, like I said, it's, we're taking the student from just the introduction idea of what apologetics is all about. And we're essentially trying to build a case. So if I can remember all of it off the top of my head, we start with what apologetics is. We get into what truth and faith is and what that looks like. Then we get into worldviews. So to understand how to share your faith, you need to understand what other people think. But we can't hit every worldview, so we hit the most popular. So we talk about what worldviews are. Then we talk about naturalism, pantheism, and then monotheism. Naturalism, pantheism are probably the most popular worldviews and have the most influence in the world right now. So those are the 2 that we sort of focused on. Then we dive into things about science and what does that look like and how do we see God in science and things like DNA in terms of how do we see God in creation? How do we understand this relationship between faith and science? And we even look at like how to build a case for God Himself. What about intelligent design? Where do we see God in beauty? Then we get into some strange things like even agency. Our understanding of free will, our understanding of morality. How do we see God in all of these things? How do all of these things show us evidence of who God is? So what we've started with is what is apologetics? What is a worldview? Then who is God and how can I know Him? How can I find out who He is and where is He revealing Himself? Then we dive into things like Jesus and the scriptures, and then evil, and then finally challenges and doubts and questions and those kinds of things, and moving into actually how to actually share your faith.
Great. Yeah, and for those watching, we'll go ahead and post a link to the actual scope and sequence below this video. So a big question, when can we actually start ordering the advocates material?
We are on time for a July release. So this is very exciting. Like I said, everything is on its way to the publishers. So this is very exciting. We actually finished, I brag about this all the time, we finished 3 days early, maybe 2, but whatever, it doesn't matter, we finished early.
That's great. Is there anything else you'd like to share with advocates? That's all the questions I have right now. So anything else you have?
I think it's important that the thing that I say all the time is, I spent 10 years as a Christian educator, and I watched many, many, many students walk across the graduation stage. And I always wondered to myself, are these students ready? Are they ready to face college? Are they ready to get into a career? And not are they ready academically, but are they ready spiritually? Are they ready for the onslaught of secularism that is going to come their way in the world of academics and college and beyond? And many of them were, but there's still maybe just as many that weren't. Students are still walking away from the church. The statistics of the 65 to 75, whatever it is, percent of students that are walking away from the church post high school, that statistic is not going away. And what I have found consistently is that when we start talking about the big questions of life, when we invite students into a space where we can actually encourage the big questions, the challenging questions, the questions that maybe we don't even really have answers to, we need to help find, look them up and figure it out. Those kinds of spaces, students are more likely to stick around, find the answers, appreciate the answers, and pursue a life of faith in Jesus on their own, apart from their parents, and stick with the church. It's clear. And curriculum like Advocates is so hard by yourself to put together, to do a week-by-week thing and to figure it all out and to have to do all the reading and all the expert work that goes into figuring out the world of apologetics. We've done it for you. The experts have done it for you so that you can walk alongside your students, you can pastor them, and you can mentor them and develop those relationships and answer those questions. We just have come alongside to help you. I think if any curriculum that you've ever considered buying or using, this is the one that you have to use. I think, my passion is that every church ought to be using it, because I think it's that important, not just because it's ours, because it's that important. I think you will find that students will be more engaged, they'll be thinking more, and the chances of them sticking with the church and sticking with truth are going to greatly increase as a result.
Well, thank you for that, all that information. And I said, that's all the questions I have. So we'll let you close us out.
Yeah, I think the first step is to download a sample, get journey.org, get the sample, work through it, and sort of get an idea of what it looks like and get your kind of feet wet, look at the scope and sequence, figure out what your year is going to look like. If we can be of any help at all, please let us know. We're happy to help. We're happy to walk you through it. We're happy to come alongside in any way that we can to make this a successful year in guiding your students and getting them a much deeper and closer walk with Jesus.